So what if I told you there's a secret playbook, a set of rules that some of the most powerful people in Silicon Valley use to build their empires? Well, today we're opening the case file on the man who, you could argue, wrote that playbook, Peter Thiel. Now, this isn't going to be some stuffy biography. Oh no, this is a financial investigation. We're going to follow the money, we're going to decode his strategy, and we're going to uncover the hidden rules that let him build a multi-billion-dollar empire from the ground up. Let's get into it.
Everything, and I mean everything you need to know about Peter Thiel, his entire empire, his worldview, his strategy, it's all right here, packed into this one single question. This isn't just some clever thing he asks in interviews. You gotta understand, this is a weapon. It's the key he uses to find what he calls secrets, these incredibly valuable companies and ideas that basically nobody else is building. So what kind of secrets are we even talking about here? To figure that out, we have to go all the way back to the beginning. To really get how this all started, we have to rewind. Before all the venture funds, before the secret plots, there was this crucible moment. It all happened inside a small startup called PayPal, where a high-stakes war forged not just a company, but a network that would literally go on to reshape the entire internet.
Okay, so in its early days, PayPal wasn't just a startup, it was a complete war zone. They were getting hit relentlessly by these super sophisticated fraudsters who were draining the company of millions of dollars. I mean, this was a full-on existential threat. And right here, we find our first clue. The co-founder, Max Levchin, who was born in Ukraine, went deep undercover. He actually infiltrated the fraudsters' online forums, he learned their methods, and he got into this constant battle of innovation day in and day out just to keep the company from going under.
Now, this trial by fire, it did something pretty incredible. It created this intense bond, this loyalty among the early team that went way, way beyond a typical 9-to-5 job. You know, they weren't just colleagues. They were basically co-conspirators on a mission for survival. And this shared experience, it created a really powerful worldview and a network that would soon become legendary, known as the PayPal Mafia. So after eBay swooped in and bought PayPal for $1.5 billion in 2002, the Mafia scattered to the winds. But what they built next, I mean, it is the stuff of Silicon Valley legend. We're talking about LinkedIn, Yelp, YouTube, SpaceX, Tesla. These are companies that literally define our world today. This tiny, battle-hardened group of entrepreneurs didn't just get rich, they completely reshaped the internet as we know it. And right there, at the center of this whole web of influence, was their consigliere, Peter Thiel.
So, how in the world does a philosophy born in the trenches of fighting online fraud turn into a multi-billion-dollar war chest? Well, the answer lies in the financial engine at the very core of Thiel's power, a venture capital firm that, you guessed it, breaks all the rules. This right here is Founders Fund, but don't you dare think of it as a typical VC firm. It's better to think of it as a machine, set up back in 2005 and designed for one single purpose, to find those secrets that Thiel is always talking about. It's basically his contrarian philosophy brought to life, a vehicle for betting big on world-changing ideas that almost everyone else thinks are crazy. And this slide, this reveals Thiel's most controversial and maybe his most powerful belief. Competition is for losers. Yeah, you heard me right. He argues that fighting with your rivals in a market that already exists is just a recipe for mediocrity and a brutal fight for survival. The real goal, the only goal, is to build what he calls a creative monopoly, a business so unique and so valuable that it just doesn't have any real competition. And look, this isn't just some philosophical idea. It's an actionable playbook. Think of it as the secret recipe for building a modern-day monopoly. When Thiel and his team at Founders Fund are hunting for their next big bet, they're scoring it against these 4 traits. Is the tech at least 10 times better than anything else out there? Does it have network effects? You know, like Facebook, where every new person who joins makes it more valuable for everyone else. Does it have economies of scale? And can it build a brand so iconic it basically becomes the whole category, like Apple? This isn't just a checklist, folks. It is a blueprint for world domination. Okay, so Founders Fund is the engine for building these new monopolies. Then Palantir, well, Palantir is the crown jewel. It's the ultimate expression of that anti-fraud idea born back at PayPal. But this time, it's scaled up to operate in the shadows with governments and giant global corporations. Known far and wide as Silicon Valley's most secretive company, Palantir builds software that wrangles these massive, chaotic piles of data for clients like the CIA, the Department of Defense, and major banks. They're tackling some of the world's most wicked problems, from counterterrorism and disaster relief all the way to sniffing out multi-billion-dollar financial fraud.
But here's where it gets really, really interesting. The software is obviously powerful, but it's not Palantir's true competitive advantage. I mean, a rival could, in theory, replicate their code. But what they can't replicate is the secret weapon that makes Palantir's technology truly indispensable.
Say hello to the Forward Deployed Engineer, or FDE. This is a role Palantir basically invented. Think of them as a kind of hybrid super soldier. They're a brilliant coder, a sharp consultant, and a strategic product manager, all rolled into one person. They get embedded directly with the customer on site, solving their hardest problems. They become what insiders call the human API, making the software so deeply integrated and so essential that ripping it out becomes pretty much impossible.
So, we've seen how Thiel builds power. But what happens when he decides to use that power not to create something, but to eliminate something? This brings us to the most dramatic and calculated move of his entire career, a covert, decade-long plot to bring a media empire to an end.
You see, when the story first broke that Peter Thiel had secretly financed the lawsuit that bankrupted Gawker Media, the world saw it as a simple act of revenge. But that's just the surface story. When you look at it through the lens of our investigation, you see a masterclass in strategy. This was the 0-to-1 playbook applied to warfare. This was the weaponization of capital, a patient, long-term operation to achieve a single, devastating goal. This is a real-world demonstration of how power really works in the 21st century. Just look at this timeline. This wasn't a fit of rage. This was a cold, calculated plan that started way back in 2007. For years, Thiel quietly put together a legal team, like a general preparing for battle, just searching for the perfect case. When they found it in 2012 with Hulk Hogan, he secretly funneled $10 million into the lawsuit. And then he waited, patiently, for 4 more years. Can you even imagine that level of patience, that kind of long-term thinking? This was not a lawsuit. It was a chess game played out over an entire decade. And this was the checkmate. $140 million, a number so staggeringly huge it wasn't just meant to punish Gawker, it was designed to be a fatal shot, forcing the company into bankruptcy and making sure it would cease to exist. A complete and total victory. So what do we see when we finally connect all the dots? From that survival mode crucible at PayPal to the monopoly hunting of Founders Fund, the human API of Palantir, and the strategic takedown of Gawker. What we see is a single cohesive doctrine for building and wielding power in our modern world. All right, let's break down the Thiel doctrine. Step 1, find secrets by asking that contrarian question. Step 2, build a loyal mafia that's been forged in the fires of a high-pressure environment. Step 3, use the 0-to-1 framework to aim for monopoly, not boring old competition. Step 4, create a human API to make your product so essential it can't be ripped out. And finally, step 5, be willing to weaponize capital, deploying it patiently and strategically to achieve your long-term goals. This isn't just a business philosophy, it's a playbook for power. This doctrine has already completely reshaped technology and finance, and you can see its influence spreading into politics and beyond. The methods are proven, the capital is vast, and the ambition, well, it's limitless. So the only real question left for us is, now that you have the playbook, where do you think it's going to be deployed next?